Good morning, everybody. I am starting a new series called Python Hints, and I thought I'd get started, well, at the beginning with Python hint number 1. And so one thing that has been coming up quite a bit in some recent assignments is this use of the Dunder main. And so we're going to chat a little bit about Dunder functions and Dunder main today. So first of all, let's talk a little bit about standalone Python structure. So normally in a Python program, what we like to see is at the very top we've got our import statements, then maybe we have a couple of function definitions, and then we define a main function, and the main function has a couple of jobs. The first is that we might define any variables that we have there. We can set some values, stuff like that, and then we can call all of our other functions. Now the nice thing is that this is one-stop shopping, but it's also what we call our top level in our program code. And then of course we have to call the main function itself. And so this is a standard sort of implementation of a Python function. So let's take a look at our Python program. So let's take a quick look at what that actually looks like in operating code. So here is that exact program, and you can see I've got the import statement. Now I'm not importing anything else, that's just where they would go. And then we would add some comments to this, right? We would want to adhere to PEP 8 style guide. So I'll just make a note of that, right? PEP 8, right? But there we have it. And then if we go ahead and run this, you can see what it looks like when it runs over here, but we'll save it and we'll run it again. There we go. So pretty straightforward. And this is what we like to see for Python normal structure for straightforward functions. Okay. Now there's something I'd like to show you before we leave this particular function, and that is that the use of the word main is just a convention. And so I could change this to be just about anything. I could say I'm going to call this function banana, and then I'm going to call banana. We'll save it and run it again. Right? So there we go. So I could actually call it anything I want, but main is the convention that we all use. And so to make myself happy and so I can sleep tonight, I'm gonna bring this back to main. Okay. Now the thing that folks often do is use this convention here, right? This whole thing seems exactly the same, except now we've got this call down here. And there's nothing wrong with it, but I think it's very instructive to find out why we might be using that, because it is kind of special. So we've invoked this Dunder underscore, or the double underscore, function call, and we've got this reference to main. So there's actually a lot of special stuff that's going on here. So maybe we ought to take a closer look at what's happening and why we might use this. So what's a Dunder function? Well, a Dunder function just simply means that it's a double underscore in front of the name and after the name, whatever the name is. So you can see that in the Python documentation, and I will include all the links for this in the show notes, but we've got this asterisk. So really what this is saying is that anything that's got a double underscore in front and a double underscore in the following spaces is called a Dunder function. So these are system-defined names, and so they have some very particular use in there. And then right in the Python documentation, it says any use of Dunder functions in any context that does not follow the explicitly documented use is subject to breaking without warning. So if you're going to use them, you ought to take a look at the docs and understand why you're using them, and maybe use them appropriately. Now again, you can get away with this particular one, but some of them are very, 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 very important. And again, we'll do some more examples here in a second. Okay, so the common use of Dunder functions we see is in importation and classes. So anytime you're going to import, we have to sort of realize that you've got a Python program that is going to import everybody else, and that makes it top level. And then if we're in classes, we'll find out that there's lots and lots of specialized use of Dunder functions. So top level, Dunder main is the name of the environment where the top level code is run. And I'll show you exactly what that means here in a second. So that's the user-defined Python program or module that starts running. So the one that calls everybody else. In classes, we have the data class structure or the class type, and there's lots and lots of Dunder methods in a particular class that you might create. And one of the big ones is the Dunder init method that we use when we create classes. Now I'll also say that there are single underscore naming conventions that we also use. There's also leading double underscore or leading single underscore constructors that we use too. But we're just getting started, and so maybe we'll leave it right there. So let's take a look at some examples with the Dunder main. So here we have the code from the slide, right? It's exactly the same, except I've added a couple things. So we've got our two functions. I've got an import statement here because we're going to do some fooling around with our third Python module here. And here's the call to the two, right, in our main. And then we've got our called main. So this is that Dunder main right here. So let's go ahead and run this. Now, Dunder main is a very particular function. And this program has something called name. What is this? We've been focusing on Dunder main, but what is this right here that we're using? Well, what happens if we actually print the name at this point? Oh, we get that it's an actual value. So Dunder name actually has a value, and in this case, Dunder name content is Dunder main. So I don't know if I can say that 3 times fast. There is a very particular use for this and a very particular thing that's happening under the hood. So when you run this little snippet of code, well, we find out that we're saying, oh, if name is equal to this, well, what's name? I didn't define name anywhere. Oh, the system defined that. And the system defined it here because this is my top level code. Now let's bring up hint 1c, and we'll find out what's going on in there. So here is hint 1c. Now I've commented out all of this, but what I'm going to do now is that I'm going to first, well, let's first see what happens if what if I had a main defined here? Could I get to it? Now right now I'm going to say that generally this is a bad idea. You do not want to have the same function names in different modules that you're importing. So that's generally a bad idea. That's why I use function 3 and function 4. But could we get to this, right? Does this actually create confusion? Because I've got it up here too. What happens if I actually run this now? Will I call function 3 and function 4? So let's see what happens. Oh, it never called them. Why? Because this is a reference to what's going on in the top level. Well, what if I did something crazy like I said, well, I want to call main. So if I did something like this and I said, well, I really want to get after that particular function. Well, this would actually wind up being a recursive call to this guy here, and I would get into an infinite loop, and I don't really want to do that. So it just doesn't work. It's bad programming practice. Okay, so we can't get to that. We don't want to name our functions the same thing across there. But what if I did this? So we'll take another look at 1c again. So here is 1c, right? And maybe maybe we'll sort of put this way off to the side. There we go. There's some organization of windows for us. Okay, so now what if I actually want to get after these? So I'm going to go ahead and undo the calls here, or undo the comments so that I can call it. And we'll go ahead and run this again. Oh, there we go. So we're function 1, function 2, function 3, function 4. All right, so we've successfully imported this, right? And then we've gone ahead and run all of those functions. Now, the significance of Dunder name. I've got this function over here that says my name. And then I've got the same call, or the same line of code, the same statement as I have over here. But what happens if I call that one right now? Oh, take a look at this. When I call this function here, the Dunder name now, the content is actually hint1c, which is the name of this module that I imported. All right, so there is a very particular use of Dunder name and Dunder main. And so it's really, really important that we come to understand them. All right, so I hope this set of examples helps us understand what in the world this line of code means, or these lines of code, and then maybe where it might be appropriate to use the Dunder functions. All right, we are being Pythonic. So this has been a look at the Dunder main and Dunder name and Dunders in general. Remember, the main uses that we have for these are when we're doing importation and when we're using classes. Well, that was our first hint. I hope you enjoyed it. Hey, hit that like button if I helped in any way, and subscribe. And whether you're running main or Dunder main, may those Python statements always do what you expect them to.